So can you tell us first visit as Bishop of Calgary, actually. So why did you decide to come?
Well, one of the things that's important for me, since my background has been in seminary formation, was to reach out and to meet the seminarians and actually to come and to see where they are studying. A number of years ago, I came to the old St Joseph Seminary, and I knew that it had recently been renovated and built in the last 6 to 7 years. So I was also curious to see the surroundings and to see what Archbishop Smith and the Diocese of Edmonton have done here. And I've been very impressed. It's a tremendous seminary space. I've been to a number of seminaries throughout North America and have had the opportunity to see old and some new seminaries, and this has a very, very new and distinct feature. So I'm very pleased with the architectural design, the chapel that I celebrated Mass in today. I've yet to see the seminarian rooms. Having been a seminarian at one point in my life, I'd like to see, how the rooms are for seminarians in this day and age too. So, yeah.
Okay. And you were installed as the 8th Bishop of Calgary on February 27th. So you haven't been there for that long, but what are your impressions of Calgary so far?
Well, it's a large metropolitan city, somewhat similar, I guess I would say, like Edmonton, Vancouver, and Toronto. It has challenges, obviously, with growth. What I've found as unique about Western Canada, there is a sense of welcome. The people don't drive as quickly and as erratically as they do in Toronto, and they actually stop and allow you to cross the street, which is very human and very kind of nice. I mean, it sounds kind of simple, but the pace of the city isn't the pace of some of the larger cities that I've been in. I've been amazed at the sunshine. The number of days that there have been sun, even though it's cloudy today, but in Calgary, when I left this morning, it was sunny. So, and also the vista. In different parts of Canada, you become accustomed either to water, if you're on each of the coasts. In Ontario, there are the lakes, Great Lakes, but here it's the mountains and the rolling terrain. So, yeah.
And how are you settling into the new job?
Well, what I'm doing is exactly this. I'm trying to go to as many events as possible. It's just an opportunity for me to be out and to meet various people. I've had 2 confirmations this week. I've been to a fundraiser for building a new church. I went to the University of St Mary's and celebrated Mass for the staff and students and blessed a new educational space. Besides being in the Chancery and having interviews such as this. So it's a busy schedule, but I find with the busyness, it helps me to sort of become inserted into the diocese to get to know it as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. And what are your plans or your vision or even your platform for the diocese?
Well, I met with the Council of Priests and I've suggested and will follow it through, but I think there's need for a pastoral plan. There's been a lot of growth, but now I think it's an opportunity to step back, to assess the growth and where does the diocese need to go. So pastoral planning would be one priority. Education, the University of St Mary's, coming here to Edmonton, to the seminary as well, and Newman Theological. I want to support and to increase the educational opportunities in Calgary. I've also developed a custom and a practice in previous assignments as a bishop to do pastoral visits. It's what Pope Francis calls about being close to the people. So I take 3 days, an extended period of time, and I go to the parish, go to the schools, end up celebrating Mass, meeting many groups of people. And so it gives me a prolonged period of time in being close to the people in a parish and getting to know them. So that would be another priority. As well, I think the youth, because the upcoming synod on faith, discernment, and vocations. I think it's Pope Francis's invitation for us to help our young people to know that discernment, the life of faith, their vocation, the choice they're going to make in life, is essential not only for the church, but for the world and for themselves. So I see the diocese maybe trying to respond to that as the synod prepares and as develops. So, yeah.
And you did talk a bit about discernment this morning in your homily. What is your message for Calgary seminarians?
Well, for them, to have the opportunity to meet with them individually, and I've asked them just simple questions like, when did you first get a sense of that call? Could you describe some of the important events that you think were events that strengthened you in this response to God's call? And they've been very open to sort of say, they didn't feel they were called, but almost resistant. And like Jonah, like one of them used the example of Jonah, of sort of walking away from that call and realizing that that was how God was actually working in their life. So my message to them was one of support. I also tell seminarians they need to stretch themselves, meaning, they need to be open to being challenged, either challenging themselves to new experiences and growth that's needed for them in preparation for the priesthood. And also, I think, to recognize the gifts. Some of them, I'm told, that they're very gifted pastorally and intellectually. So I was pleased to hear some of the assessment from the formators here on how they're progressing in their formation. So.
And what would you say is the most pressing issue facing Catholics today?
I think it's the relevance of faith. It's sort of saying that faith isn't something that's esoteric. It's not something that's just intellectual or what I believe, but it's something that I must live because Christ is important. I've encountered Christ. And so when we are witnessing and trying to live our faith, then I think that there's a relevance, and people will begin to see that the way we've chosen to live, the person that we follow, is something that is important and therefore is relevant for the rest of the world. And so it becomes somewhat frustrating, I think, for the young to sort of say, well, our society doesn't see a relevance in Christ or in faith. And they need to be encouraged, I think, and that's why Pope Francis is doing this, that our faith has meaning, it is relevant, and it's what the world needs, even though they might not think that. And so we as Christians, I think, must always be persevering in that desire to be relevant about living and witnessing to our faith.
Mm-hmm. And how do you overcome the secular narrative and, the secular society?
Well, a good example would have been, my talk and my homily to the university students. I talked about, freedom is a wonderful intersection between Christianity and our society. It has the potential for that. Our religion and our faith brings us to a deeper understanding of faith. But faith that's focused on self-interest or is autonomous, the way our society is, then we begin to see how society and secularism is so far apart on these key values, these key understandings of our faith. And so I took that as an opportunity to pose these questions about freedom of inquiry. But I said freedom has limits. But our society needs to hear that message, But we have to find points of intersection, is what Pope Francis says. And that would be an example of, trying to get a dialogue about what is freedom. Is it freedom that's autonomous, or is it freedom that has a certain sense of serving the truth? And the truth also will set you free, as Jesus said. And that was in the gospel passage. And I had an opportunity after Mass to sit and talk with the young people, and they talked about the homily, talked about freedom and how society. So I think that's pastoral ways of trying to do that. Pope Francis wants us to engage, but be critical. If we sort of are always being judgmental and pushing society and people away, then are they going to be really open to hear our message? And I think that's why he's sort of asking us and challenging us to sort of be more focused on entering into the dialogue, but not being afraid to pose these questions.
Mhm. I think Archbishop Smith has been doing that quite a bit, especially when it comes to the issue of euthanasia. What issue do you think is the most pressing, or that you would like to change minds about?
Well, I agree. Archbishop Smith, many of the other bishops across Canada, we're all faced with this desire on the part of society to have this choice to end their life. I think, is the ultimate expression of not wanting to accept the limits that are imposed upon us, not because we want them, but because God has created us this way, and that we aren't the author of our life. And that even as we come to the end of our life, loneliness and suffering can be dealt with. Pain can be managed through hospice care, through palliative care. And I think we need to support those in our society, Christians and others, who know that in living a life and dying well, meaning not choosing, but allowing death to take its course, and having society and people know that there's a dignity in that, and that they're willing to help them as caregivers, as family members, and that suffering, when related and lived in and through Christ, can bring a fruit to not only that individual, but family members and society. And so I think that's the message we have to sort of keep pressing, as well as the freedom of conscience of our caregivers, that they aren't coerced and they aren't forced into performing this act, which goes against conscience, which goes against life and truth, and that they have the freedom to object and not to participate in that act. A society that respects freedom should respect the freedom of conscience and religion.
Is there anything that you'd like to change about the Diocese of Calgary?
I don't think I could answer that just after 6 weeks. It's been my style, I guess, is to be very patient, to listen first, and listen, but at the same time offer maybe new ways of considering things, but not necessarily pushing change right away. I like to sow seeds and ideas that maybe we could do things in a different way. And then oftentimes it's met with, well, we've been thinking that we should be doing this in a different way or should change this. And I find that that's more effective in implementing change, rather than simply coming in and saying, well, I don't like this, and I think that this needs to change. Have you ever thought about doing it this way? Maybe we could do it in a new way. And therefore then it sort of sows the invitation, well, I guess we could do things and change things. Mm-hmm. And I find that a little more effective. Okay. Takes a little longer, but more effective.
Yeah. Do you have an Episcopal motto? I
do. Mm-hmm. It's called Habe Fiduciam in Domino. It means trust in the Lord. And it comes from an Old Testament Sirach passage. And the full one is, trust in the Lord and do not rely on your own insight. So it's basically saying, we need not see our own strengths, our own gifts, our own insight, but really to trust in the Lord. So that's my motto.
Okay. And do you miss Toronto?
Do I miss? No.
Ontario?
I'll be honest. It takes me at least a good year and a half, 2 years to feel at home in a new environment. I've moved 3 times in the last 7 years. I just started to feel comfortable in Toronto, and then I was moved to Peterborough. And just at the 2-year mark, I was feeling more comfortable. And then I'm asked to move out here. So, but the thing that sort of supports me is ministry and being close to the people and serving them. And then gradually, I think my own personal life, I'll get to feel more comfortable in the Western. I like to ski, so that will help. I'm going to have to learn how to golf, I'm told, so that I can enjoy that in the summer. But you know, there's many great things about Canada, and each of the provinces, as I've come to visit them, has unique features. So I'm looking forward to discovering them here in the West.
Okay. Leafs, Oilers, or Flames?
None. The Boston Bruins.
Okay.
I'm an original six, and the story goes that the Boston Bruins used to come to my hometown of London, Ontario for their training camp. And so I watched Bobby Orr break into the NHL as a 17-year-old. And I was in high school, and so I used to skip my last class of high school and go out and watch the afternoon practices. And so I have become a Boston Bruin fan because they came to our hometown, and that was their place of a training camp for, a good 5 or 6 years. So, but if Boston is not in the playoffs, then I'm going to root for the Flames.
Okay. No, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't have any more questions.
I think that's great, thank you.
Is that okay?
That's great, thank you. Appreciate it.
So what?
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem. So maybe we can learn in Calgary from what you're doing here. So we have to do a new communications down there too. So, but you're going high tech and digital.